Today, we'll be doing a face-off of all the Nintendo Switch wireless controllers made by GameSir to determine which is the best one that you should get. GameSir's had a lot of parts that overlap with their Xbox and Switch controllers typically. I feel when they make an announcement of their newest controller, I look at it carefully to see what parts might have been reused or if they actually made any significant changes. I'll give them credit for their mobile controllers though. Despite their higher price tag, they do seem to do their job quite well. But then, there are some users that want to use an actual gaming controller when they play on their smartphone. So, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these controllers. All three controllers feature Hall effect joysticks. Their layouts are about the same, except the Nova has the Switch layout, and the other two feature the Xbox layout when it comes to these buttons. Additionally, the Nova Lite lacks any back buttons. All feature tri-mode connectivity, which means they can connect via Bluetooth, their wireless dongle, or through a wired cable. But keep in mind that you need to buy the wireless adapter of the Nova off GameSir's website or AliExpress for about $8 to $10. Oddly enough, the Nova Lite doesn't come with a cable, so make sure you have a spare if you buy this controller. The instructions on the Nova Lite are also QR code scanned, as they do not come with their controller. You can find the QR code on the box. This product has a very minimalist approach, which explains its rock bottom price tag. The standard Nova features RGB lighting and HD rumble, while the other two have standard rumble. The Nova and Cyclone Pro come with instruction booklets and cables, as you see with the setup. And to my shock, despite being cheaper, the Nova and Nova Lite both come with protective cases, which I think is an incredible value, and these things are pretty sturdy. Now we're going to go ahead and do a sample button test, but keep in mind that the Cyclone Pro right here uses micro switch buttons, while the others feature membrane. So here we go with the XYAB buttons. All right, now for the D-pad. All right, and now for these buttons. Oh, and this lights up. There you go. And now we'll go ahead and do the shoulder and trigger buttons. And for these two, because they have the rear buttons, what's cool about the design of this one is that it seems like it's one whole button, even though they're actually two. So now you heard all the button differences. I personally like the shorter travel distance on the Cyclone Pro. When it comes to the D-pads, they're all actually pretty good. My order of preference from first to third is the Nova Lite, then the Nova, and then number 3, the Cyclone Pro. The Nova D-pad seems a little bit on the floaty side, while the Cyclone's D-pad is a little bit stiffer. Therefore, I give the edge to the Nova Lite. Now keep in mind when it comes to the thumbsticks, only the Nova features anti-friction rings. And I feel that the thumbsticks for this one feel the most hollow. So we'll do some sounds on these two before we take an up close look. All right, first, here's a close-up of the Nova and Nova Lite. I like the orange, especially on the Nova Lite. And then with the Cyclone Pro and the Nova Lite. And then comparing the Nova to the Cyclone Pro. Although oddly enough, even though the joysticks look the same, they still feel smoother. As far as controlling the games, the Nova seems to control the games the best, while the Cyclone 4 does get the job done, and same with the Nova Lite. But I'll give the edge to the Nova for having the smoothest movement out of all three controllers. Both the Nova and the Cyclone Pro feature two rear button layouts that are programmable. They can be programmed as a single press, or the Nova can be programmed with up to 12 multi-button combos or macros. Meanwhile, the Cyclone Pro does the same, but with up to 16 button combos. Both can be programmed by themselves without using software, or you can use the app on their smartphone, but I would personally advise against using their smartphone app. Also, there is no PC software app to program these controllers. I found the Nova Lite to be the most comfortable for long play sessions. The Nova feels larger than the Cyclone Pro, while the Cyclone Pro is the only one with anti-slip rubber grips. As a whole, I give the edge to the Cyclone Pro because of its more premium feel and anti-slip grip. Now to get into the meat and potatoes of the controllers. First, we'll talk about the weight of each controller. The Nova Lite weighs 205 grams, the Nova comes in at 270, and the Cyclone Pro barely is the heaviest at 220 grams. This makes it sound like a boxing match. Basically, there isn't much of a difference in terms of their weight. They are all easy to hold, so that's not an issue when it comes to playing them, but also double check if your hands are either too big or too small when you play the games. Now, the Nova Lite has a battery measuring at 600 milliamps per hour, while the Nova's battery is at 1,200 milliamps. Finally, the Cyclone Pro rounds out at 860 milliamps per hour, and also features the longest battery life at 30 hours, compared to the 8-hour battery life of the Nova Lite and 10 hours for the Nova with the RGB off, and 8 hours with the RGB on. The Nova Lite and the Nova both have two rumble motors, with the Nova featuring HD rumble. Yet surprisingly, it had the weakest rumble or haptic feedback of all three controllers. Meanwhile, the Cyclone Pro has 4 rumble motors, 2 on the triggers and 2 on the grips. These have them on the grips. The Nova Lite retails for $24.99. The Nova is $36.99, but if you go for the wireless dongle, it should be about $44.99. And the Cyclone Pro, meanwhile, is priced at $49.99. These prices are Amazon retail prices, while the adapter you can get through either GameSir's website, as previously mentioned, or through AliExpress. As far as the triggers are concerned, the Nova Lite has analog triggers. The Nova has hair triggers for faster response per GameSir's website. And the Cyclone Pro is the only one that has Hall effect triggers. Although none of these controllers have trigger stoppers, which I think is a bit of a bummer. One thing to note that is very odd about the Nova is that you can't adjust the rumble intensity at all, while the other controllers feature it, as GameSir had notified me through the Nova video, which will be in the description. And lastly, none of the cables of these are braided, so the quality of the cable might rip apart a little easy. Just be careful. Only the Nova Lite doesn't feature gyroscopic controls, and they can only be turned off if the game features those controls. Now, we'll go ahead and take a look at some input lag and circularity test data. And now for Street Fighter Alpha gameplay. Now for some Doom Eternal gameplay in party mode. Continuing on using the Cyclone Pro. And now for some Metal Slug X gameplay. In general, I think these controllers do serve their specific use cases. As niche as they may be, they do their work for their intended audiences, no doubt. The Nova Lite is a no-frills basic controller that I find better than Nintendo's own procontroller, despite not having gyroscopic controls. The Nova is a bit of a refined controller that gives people a chance to play wireless without the use of a dongle, which makes sense. I mean, you don't want to lose that little part easily. It still seems odd that they have to sell it for another $8 to $10 without a huge uptick in performance while still having weak haptic feedback. The Cyclone Pro, meanwhile, checks all the boxes, although its thumbsticks sound and feel the most hollow, which do leave a bit more to be desired. But at least they do the job of playing first-person shooters as intended. In the end, I choose the Cyclone Pro for its complete package. The Nova Lite I pick second because it punches way more above its price tag, and the Nova last. Although, I don't consider the Nova a mediocre controller by any means, compared to my experience with the recent G7HE for Xbox, which you can check in the description as well. I think people will be satisfied with the Nova with or without the wireless dongle. Once again, the Cyclone Pro is my pick from this lot, but none of these controllers screamed terrible. None of them even felt cheap. I mean, did they have the best quality that you could ever feel in a controller in general? Not really, but they don't feel like they're gonna break apart easily. I had fun doing this comparison, and I hope you guys find the right controller for your needs. Even if it's not one of these GameSir controllers, I still hope you find the right controller for your playing needs. As always, thank you guys for your time. Till next time, have a great one and take care.